Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I am back with more Battlytics analyses for you. Tonight we're looking at the Cougar Prime. Very excited to do this one. I played a Cougar not too long ago, and anything with 2 clan large pulse lasers makes my day. So this little guy, 35 tons, I think 3058 it was built. And it packs 2 LRM-10s, 2 large pulse lasers. It's my kind of mech. It's not terribly fast. It is decently armored. I'm very curious to see how this one does. So guys, stay tuned. It's coming right up. All right, so here we are with the technical overview of the Cougar Prime. So this thing was allegedly built by Jade Falcon, and it was like an adder type competitor. I will tell you, this thing looks way better to me than an adder, just based on the battle value alone. Adder is close to 2,000, a little over if I recall. This thing is only 1485. You get 2 of the best weapons in the game, which is the Clan Large Pulse Laser. Yes, I realize that the ERPPCs and a targeting computer are a nasty combination, but I will tell you the Large Pulse Lasers, return on your investment is massive. So again, it's Clan Light, was built in 3058, so it was well after that sort of clan invasion era, and we're sort of getting into the Civil War type era there. It moves 5'8", it doesn't jump, so it's not terribly fast for a 35-ton mech, but it does remind me of like the Raven, the older Raven designs, right, at that same move profile there. It has 10 double heat sinks, so it can dissipate 20 points of heat. It does have an XL fusion engine, and it is packed with endosteel and ferrofibrous armor. The armor coverage is 88.2%, not bad. It's 105 total pips of armor. The coverage generally is good. It's a little light in the legs and the center torso, but really not bad. Those side torsos, which do have the ammo and the LRM-10s, are packed in real well with armor, so that's a good thing to see. And lastly, no hand actuators on this mech because each of those arms does have a Clan Large Pulse. Now, let's take a look at the damage. This is where it gets exciting. So the first thing to notice here is how hot this mech can get right out of the gate. As soon as those large pulse lasers are in range and you're alpha striking, you can build up 9 points of heat per turn, 10 if you're running. So that's that's like 3 turns to shut down territory there. So you do need to be careful how you shoot and what you shoot. It can get very hot very quickly. Now on the optimized side, the baseline damage right out of a gate, let's look at that. It's 192.3 damage. That's astronomical amounts of damage coming out of a 35-ton mech. You can optimize that to 205.4 points of damage, so it's a total gain of about 6.8%. That's not bad at all, but again, it gets so hot so quickly, it's very difficult, at least in the simulation, to try to really squeeze any heat out of this thing earlier. Now, of course, in a real game situation, I think it is fast enough where you can alpha strike once, maybe even, if you're willing to risk it, maybe even twice, build up 18 points of heat, and then go stand in a corner. And even if you run, you'll still bleed off all 18 points of that heat the following turn, and then you can get back into the fight. So it is well designed, I think, in that regard. The numbers tend to work out. In terms of the lethality, this thing is brutal. It does achieve 100% kills on the Javelin, and largely those are just CT core outs. It does have 17.9, almost 18% head kills, which is pretty good as well. And those pulse lasers, they do a decent chunk of damage. And again, the Javelin only does have 10 head armor. That's intentional. And so, you are looking for those big chunks of damage coming out, and those large pulse lasers can certainly do that. Not much else to say here, except for this thing is, it's a killer. I mean, for sure. For a small mech, it packs a ton of damage, more than most Succession War era inner sphere assault mechs. So that is something to be said, again, about the weaponry on this thing. Now let's take a look at the defensive. I mean, it had okay armor, but again, it's a 35-ton mech, so 88% coverage on a 35-ton mech still isn't a ton, and it's not very fast. So we'll see. I mean, it still can claim that +2, +3. Let's dive in and look. We'll start with the armor diagnostic here. So this thing, pretty good overall. The only thing that irks me a little bit is the rear armor being over spec. Again, those yellow lines represent where the armor probably should be in an even distribution. It's way over in the rear. This is a mech that, you know, it's got LRMs, it's got large pulse lasers. I don't think you're really going to be at point blank. You could certainly shave a couple of points off the back and get that onto that center torso in the front, that is to say. So, you know, I don't love that. It's not a deal breaker for me. Legs look fine. However, when you go to the mobility analysis, it's taking motive hits 21.3% of the time. So that means 1 in 5 shots is basically hitting a leg actuator, you know, a hip actuator, anything that's going to slow the mech down. And you can see in the bar chart there the degradation of the TMM from a +3 all the way down to a +1.1 at the very end of the, you know, on average at the end of the 10,000 simulations. The average target mod throughout the game is 2.5, so that's not terrible. But again, you know, early game you're not seeing a lot of hits, so it is a noticeable drop. Being a 6.9, you know, would not make this mech any better because again the mods are the same. Really looking to step up to that next level, you know, to get the +3, +4, but that would probably drive the cost through the roof. As far as comparing it to similar mechs like the Adder, again, it's cheaper and you are getting the same mods. So at the end of the day, it's not that bad, I guess. Survivability, though, isn't terrific. It's only 27.4%. If you look at the central chart there, that white line, so right around turn 6, turn 7, I mean, it dumps off extremely aggressively, which corresponds to when it starts taking those motive hits if you look in the motive chart. So, you know, it gets an unlucky hit, it starts slowing down, and this thing gets knocked out of the fight. That's also when you can see that the engine kill in the stacked bar there, that's sort of the empty pink area there, that climbs very aggressively as well, so that takes up more and more. Engine deaths are almost as common as just a CT core out. They're, you know, so engine deaths make up almost 35%. CT head deaths make up about 37% of the total deaths. Ammo deaths, even though those LRMs are in the side torso there, the LRM ammo, I should say, ammo deaths are very rare. So 1.1%. Again, it's Clan Mech, it's all cased up. Not too bad. Now, one other thing to talk about in terms of the mobility hits, right? So you'll notice that the left and right leg slots are 4 of 4, which means there are roll again slots, right? So you get 6 critical slots in the leg, 4 occupied by your hip, your lower, your upper leg, your lower leg, and your foot actuator, and then you have 2 free slots, which you can typically pack in heat sinks or jump jets or whatever. In a Clan Mech, you almost always want to pack heat sinks in there because, you know, you can fit them, unlike their inner sphere counterparts. But in this case, they are roll again. So once you get through that delicate leg armor, you are guaranteed to get a motive hit. And a slow Cougar is a dead Cougar. I think Ricky Bobby said that. I don't think he did, but I wish he would have. So anyway, let's take a look at the efficiency. So damage is incredible. Survivability just sucks. I'm curious to see where this one shakes out. Here it is, my favorite analysis, the efficiency analysis. So survey says not too bad, actually, 7.36, and that is courtesy of a couple of things. We'll talk about it. So the first thing is, let's look at the effectiveness chart in the top left of your screen. So the blue area is our optimized damage. The purple area is basically the effective damage, which is a combination of the optimized and your survivability. So how available are you to do damage on that turn? So clearly, you know, the Cougar can do a little bit more damage in those last 2 turns. And when we optimized, that's when we overheated right close to the end of the the simulation. There, you kind of just dump your heat and go. But if you look at the damage chart overall, it is fairly flat. Aside from that peak, right, that happens, towards the end of the game there, like the last couple of turns in the simulation, it's a fairly flat damage curve. It has LRMs, it has large pulse lasers. So once you're within that 20-inch mark, this thing is doing a substantial amount of damage, right? It's doing very, very well. And I think that's why the efficiency is so high, because even though the survivability dumps off really hard at the end there, it's still getting in a pretty sizable amount of damage for that 1400 BV, which is very good. So a couple of other things here I want to bring to your attention. So first of all, there have been a couple of updates throughout this particular Battlytics version. But one I recently updated was the efficiency rating curve, the bell curve, if you will, because we've been doing a lot lately. So I took all of the most recent mechs, and basically everything we've ever done, which was, I don't know, like 180 mechs or something like that. And I refactored the bell curve, redrew that out. So basically, you can see it still peaks right around 5, 5.5, 5 to 6 is kind of your average. But what's interesting is like the little sort of plateau between 7 and 8. It doesn't just sort of gradually fall off. So there's a sort of a higher number of 7 and 8s than, really 8s, I think, than you would expect. But regardless, this falls at 7.36, which is still very, very, very good. It's right in that sort of meat of mechs that I want to take, right? And if you look at the gunnery sensitivity, so this is another one of those pulse-laden mechs, battle cobra syndrome, as I like to call it, where once you get over gunnery 2, your efficiency starts to drop off. You're still doing more damage at those higher gunneries, right? You're still going to get a little bit of return, but your best return on investment is at gunnery 2. And that is broken down again in that bar chart, effective damage by gunnery. Another thing I added in was showing the battle value of the mech at each one of those gunnery scores. That assumes a fixed piloting rating, of course. So if you increase the piloting, that will change these values. But this is just the gunnery change. So you'll see at gunnery 2, this thing costs 2,079 battle value. That's the same as a gunnery 4 adder, which, with the targeting computer is essentially like gunnery 3. So this thing is really good, in my opinion, bang for buck. And, basically your effective damage is 153.11. And again, effective is factoring in your survivability there. So pretty good overall. So I like this mech. I like the numbers. I like what I see. Now let me think about how I would use this thing on the tabletop. Let's talk about threat and rolls and all that good stuff. First things first, let's talk about rolls. So there are 3 rolls when I think about the Cougar. And the 3 rolls I think about all revolve around the common concept of keeping the Cougar alive as long as possible. Because, if it dies, it's no good, right? And this thing really has extremely high potential. Conversely, that means if you see a Cougar Prime on the battlefield, you should try to take it out given the opportunity. It doesn't mean chase it around the board until you die, but it does mean that if it's out in the open, you should focus it and get it off the board, delete it, because if left unchecked, this thing has a ton of potential. So those 3 roles, fire support for 1. Clearly, you sit in the back, you deliver a ton of damage. 2, a second line mech. Basically play fire support first half of the game, and once you feel like it's safe, you can close in and clean up some of the trash, get better range mods on your LRMs and things like that. The third one is a skirmisher. So this is sort of that hit and fade. You heat up, we were talking about earlier, like, boom, I alpha strike, then I run away and I hide and I cool off. Then I pop out again, I alpha strike, I run away, I hide, I cool off again. Right, you can play that sort of hit and fade with this mech pretty well. Even with a run of 8, you assume you take a couple of hits on movement from heat. You can still move 5 hexes, right? And if you're like a 3/5, let's assume you take a -2 to movement. That's good enough to get yourself back in cover if you're smart with the positioning. And even if you're not alpha striking and overheating, you can still do a pretty good job, I think, of maintaining and delivering damage and keeping this thing on the move. This is definitely one of those speed is life type mechs. You got to keep it moving. You got to keep the TMM up. You have to be smart. I would not hang it out on its own. I would probably, this is a great mech, honestly, to put in a bigger lance where there's scarier things, Warhawks, you know, whatever, things like that, right? Timberwolf, Timberwolf A, right? The one that's like really nasty. These types of mechs will draw more fire. And if people do spend time focusing on your Cougar, like, well, that's cool. Then they're going to eat 4 PPCs from your Warhawk, right? So pairing this thing where it's in a lance where it's not the big dog, I think is a really good strategy. And it's cheap enough where you can kind of fit it in and like round out the lance with it, or the star, I should say. All right, so real quick, look at the threat assessment. Look at the alpha strike potential. It's 40 damage at 20 inches, right? So as soon as those large pulse come into range, you know, you have if, and of course that's if all of your missiles hit, which is very rare, and both your pulse lasers hit, that's 40 points of damage for 9 heat. That's pretty good. Now your ACD cap is not the best. Like at those further ranges, you can see it's below 50%, right? The bright red bar versus the dark red bar. At point blank range, it gets as high as 74.9%. So that means if you fired everything, and again, clan LRMs, no minimum range, you fire everything at, I believe it's at 6 inches for this particular mech, your average calculated damage is about 30. So not terrible. That means you could expect to do about 30 points of damage for 9 heat. Is that worth it? I don't know, maybe. So overall, let's talk about the Cougar. I mean, I love this mech. I love the way the Prime has twin large pulse lasers. One of, you know, de facto like best weapon in the game. You can fight me on it. The clan one, of course, the Intersphere one is absolute garbage. That's the worst weapon in the game, by the way, the Intersphere large pulse laser. Clan large pulse, probably the best. Love that. I mean, I love the range on this mech. The speed profile is good. The armor is solid. You know, you're not going to get better survivability out of this thing unless you're going up to like a 7-11 on the speed profile. Jump jets aren't really going to do a whole lot for you. So I think it's really, really well designed, and the price point is fantastic for a clan mech. And let's face it, it looks great too. The new resculpt is awesome. So yeah, highly recommend the Cougar, guys. I think this is a fantastic mech. This is one that the patrons wanted to see. So really happy that you twisted my arm and got me to review this one. This was definitely a good one. Instinctively, I think I knew it was going to do well, but the numbers really prove it for me. So, all right. That said, if you want to buy yourself a Cougar right now, you can go over to Aries Games and Minis. That is the place to go for your mechs, your dice, your books, anything BattleTech related. You can get hardware studio stuff over there. You can get Fighting Piranha, the decals, the graphics for your mech, fantastic stuff. So you can get all of those things, Army Painter paints, anything you need, right? So Aries Games and Minis, that is your number one stop for that stuff. Also, if you do want to get more involved in the channel, or if you just love me and want to help us out, you can head on over to Patreon. You can throw us $1 a month. You can throw us 5 or 10 and get in on more exciting things, challenges, access to our digital toolkits and things like that. So that's all available for you. And if you don't want to do any of that, please at least subscribe to the channel. Give us a like, leave a comment, but just click that subscribe button. It is free and costs you absolutely nothing. So that is a huge help to the channel. That said, I got nothing else. I hope you enjoyed this review. And of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.